It's here. The game. Next on Michigan Podcast.
But there's going to be one team that's going to play solely as a team. No man is more important than the team. No coach is more important than the team. The team, the team, the team.
Looks deep for Anthony Clark. Waits for it. It's caught.
This is no time for that. In the pocket and a sack. Tim Jamison. Brady gets terrific.
Throws it and in. Touchdown Knight again. Schultz just before Brazil got him. And the leaping interception by Woodson.
Harbaugh back to throw over the middle. Caught by Collier at the 5 on his feet. Touchdown Michigan. On its way. It's good.
He's 5'7", 179 pounds, a junior at Michigan. But Jamie Morris packs a wallop, and he delivers for Bo Schembechler.
And here's your first play. Pressure coming. Second. It is Glenn Steele, number 81, who fought his way through the traffic.
Option. And Robinson calls his own number. And he's going to score. Oh, an easy touchdown for Ron Robinson and Michigan.
We're going to win the championship again because we're going to play as a team. And when we play as a team and the old season is over, you and I know it's going to be Michigan again. Michigan.
Go Blue. I'm Steve Deace. Welcome to this week's Michigan Podcast. The week of the game. Does Michigan have a chance? We'll talk about that here in a moment. First, though, I want to thank all of you that subscribe to us here on YouTube and iTunes each and every week that make this podcast and this show possible each and every week with your support. Thank you for your comments. I try to respond to as many of them as I possibly can. If you could like us, if you could subscribe, write us a positive review, we would love that. Be so appreciative. Now, if you don't like us, if you think we're really terrible at this, we don't want you to lie, just maybe not say anything, because it's Thanksgiving and it might hurt our feelings. But if you do like us, please say something positive. Help us to spread the word about what we're doing here each week at Michigan Podcast. Also want to thank our partners at Detroit Sports Podcast, which help us to get the word out about what we do here each and every week. And you can follow us on Twitter to keep up to date. We have takes all week long on everything Wolverines, including the early returns on the basketball season from the Maui Classic. We share that on our Twitter account each and every day at Michigan Podcast on Twitter. Michael Spath from WTKA Ann Arbor and the Michigan Insider will be joining us here later on in the program. But we begin with the game. And I get it. Like a lot of you, given where the team is at, given where the quarterback position is at, and the unlikelihood Brandon Peters will be playing on Saturday, I don't have a lot of optimism for our Wolverines. I look at this rivalry and how much of my childhood and teenage years revolved around the game. And I look at my son, who at age 10 has become a diehard Michigan fan like his old man. But to him, it's just another game. It's not the game to him. It's another game. Because, he's 10. He's never really lived in an era where, other than the historical factor, this was really a rivalry. And that's what happens when you win one time in a whopping 15 years. So no, I'm not very optimistic. There's a high likelihood Ohio State's going to start a 3-time captain at quarterback, and we're going to start a 3rd-string quarterback. Okay, but, we've seen, pardon the pun, stranger things in this rivalry before. In fact, we have a rivalry that is really replete with improbable results. And often they've occurred when one team comes in as the prohibitive favorite, as the Buckeyes do by double digits, according to the odds makers, on Saturday at the Big House. Therefore, without further ado, I now present our top 5 modern era improbable wins over the Ohio State Buckeyes. And we begin with number 5, 1976, Michigan 22, Ohio State nothing. Now, some of you are going to be like, why was that improbable? Michigan won by 22 points. They shut them out. Well, that's what made it improbable. The idea that Michigan would shut out the Buckeyes there at the Shoe. When you look at Ohio State came into the game undefeated in the Big Ten, Michigan, which had spent a few weeks earlier in the year, number 1 in the country, but lost to Minnesota, costing them their number 1 ranking. And this was a rivalry that Ohio State, after the upset of 1969, which we'll get to in a moment, Ohio State had kind of recaptured control of this rivalry. They got revenge in 1970. Michigan had the far better team in 1971. They went into that game 10-0. Ohio State went into that game 6-4. And Michigan barely held on to win that game 10-7. In fact, they had to come from behind with a Billy Taylor touchdown run to win that game. And then you had the Schembechler teams from 1972 to 1974, 3 of his greatest teams under Denny Franklin at quarterback. They went 32-1 combined in those 3 seasons. But because they either lost to or tied Ohio State every one of those years, they never, and they shared the Big Ten championship, they never got to play in a bowl game because of the rules that the Big Ten had at the time. So you had 1975 where Ohio State was number 1 in the country for part of that year, and Archie Griffin's senior year, and Michigan was very young with a freshman quarterback named Rick Leach. There you see him there as a sophomore against Ohio State in 76. And Ohio State won that game on a pick 6. So Ohio State had recaptured control of this rivalry. In fact, going into 1976, there was no 10-year war. What we now know as the 10-year war between Woody and Bo in Michigan-Ohio State lore, heading into 1976, it wasn't a war. You had a mammoth upset that Michigan pulled in 1969, Bo's first year. And then other than that, the rivalry was Ohio State, with one exception, the next several seasons in a row. But this was the game that really cemented the 10-year war. Michigan gets the shutout here against Ohio State and Woody Hayes in 1976 in their crib. And then to close it out, what then became the 10-year war, 1976, 1977, 1978, Bo wins all 3 of those games. And Ohio State never scores an offensive touchdown against Michigan in that span. So Michigan winning this game, they were not favored, but shutting them out as they did, dominating the game. That's what makes this number 5 on our list of improbable Michigan victories over The Ohio State University. And now number 4, also a game that took place Thanksgiving weekend. Michigan played a 12-game schedule that year because they opened up in the Pigskin Classic against Virginia. Remember that last second throw, Scott Dreisbach to Mercury Hayes. 1995, Bo versus Woody is no more. It's a new era now. Lloyd Carr, early in the week, is named permanent Michigan coach after spending the year as the interim. Ohio State has run roughshod through their schedule with eventual Heisman Trophy winner Eddie George, All-American Terry Glenn, who passed away tragically this week, God rest his soul, Bobby Hoying, a longtime NFL quarterback. They had a young guy in the offensive line you might have heard of, Orlando Pace. He was all right. Yeah, he was pretty good. Ricky Dudley at tight end, another All-American player who played a long time in the NFL. This team was loaded. Michigan limped in 8-3, like they are right now. Not too many people gave Michigan a chance to win this game. Michigan struggled throughout the year, mainly because of, strike me if this sounds familiar, uncertainty at quarterback. Michigan opened the year with redshirt freshman Scott Dreisbach, who was brilliant in the fourth quarter against Virginia, got Michigan off to a good start, and then he got banged up. And then a former walk-on by the name of Brian Griese becomes the starting quarterback and ends up being the starting quarterback in this game. Brian Griese completed only 50% of his passes in this game against Ohio State. Michigan's team that year largely driven by the defense. You saw there a minute ago, Jared Irons, Michigan's great All-American linebacker in the mid-1990s. Ohio State, a prohibitive favorite in this game. Terry Glenn guaranteeing victory against Michigan, saying Michigan is irrelevant. Like Buckeye Joey Galloway, who graduated the year prior, by the way, 1994, recently said about Michigan on ESPN, but behind one of the great individual performances by any player wearing maize and blue in this rivalry, there he is, number 21, Timanga Biaka-Batuka, or as we used to call him back in the day when we couldn't pronounce that, Tim. Tim Biaka-Batuka rushed for then a school record 313 yards against the number 2 ranked Ohio State Buckeyes on their way seemingly to a chance at a national championship. You know, there's Antoine Winfield, another longtime pro. I mean, this team for Ohio State was loaded. Now, when you look at this Michigan team, there were guys in this team who would go on to be great players. Amani Toomer's on this team. We mentioned Biaka-Batuka, Brian Greasy, John Jansen's a youngster on this team. But this was a Michigan team that had underachieved throughout the course of the year. There's Remy Hamilton, our All-American kicker, actually missing the field goal there. So this was a team that had underachieved. They had just lost on the road to Penn State. There's a freshman corner by the name of Charles Woodson picking a pass off there. All right, so I mean, there's a lot of great players in this game, but most of them for the Ohio State squad were known commodities. Most of them for Michigan were not yet established as great players, like freshman Charles Woodson. Michigan had come off a loss on the road to Penn State. I think that game was like 27-17, you know, kind of like Michigan coming off this loss on the road to Wisconsin. Almost nobody gave Michigan a chance here at all. And one of the other things about this game I remember is ABC had a camera crew in Evanston, Illinois, because Northwestern and Ohio State did not play that year. And so Northwestern needed Ohio State to lose because back then, if you didn't have a head-to-head, the tiebreaker was, if it was a shared title on who went to the Rose Bowl, is who had the longest drought between Rose Bowl berths. Well, that's clearly going to be Northwestern. And this was the year Gary Barnett took the purple to Pasadena because of the 31-23 upset that Tim Biaka-Batuka led the Wolverines to here on this game in 1995. And that's why it's number 4 on our list of improbable Michigan victories over Ohio State. Number 3, 1993, Michigan 28, Ohio State nothing. Buckeyes come into this game number 5 in the country, again controlling their own destiny for the Rose Bowl. It's them and Wisconsin. This really was Wisconsin's breakthrough year as a program with Brett Moss and Darrell Bevel, Barry Alvarez on the sidelines, and Wisconsin and Ohio State had played to a tie. That was the only blemish on the Buckeye record. They came into this game prohibitive favorites. Michigan was probably the underachieving team in college football. They started off number 3 in the preseason polls, lost early in the year to Notre Dame, and then kind of essentially just scuffled the rest of the year. They were up and down. Remember, they won that huge game at Penn State when it was Penn State's first year in the Big Ten. They pulled a big upset in State College, and they turned around and lost an ugly game at Sparty at Spartan Stadium and George Perlis, 17-7. Up and down all year long. Michigan only 6-4 coming into this game with a roster of NFL talent. I mean, you saw Tyrone Wheatley break off a big run there. You see Todd Collins at quarterback. I mean, there's a ton. There's Trezell Jenkins, who was a first-round pick, number 77 there, leading the way for Ty Wheatley. There's a ton of talent on this Michigan team. Should never have been 6-4. So somebody had to pay for this season. And lo and behold, on this day, the team that paid were your Ohio State Buckeyes. And here's the play of the game. Look at this catch from Mercury Hayes over the shoulder. And Michigan rolled Ohio State. And that really began the John Cooper is cursed against Michigan era. Because this was the first time in the rivalry since Cooper took over that Ohio State clearly came into the game with what everybody expected to be the superior team. And they walked away with a goose egg, 28-0 to Michigan. And that's why it's number 3 on our list, which brings us to number 2, 1996 in Columbus, Michigan 13, Ohio State 9. One of the biggest point spread deficits Michigan's ever faced in the history of its program. They were a massive 17-point underdog in this game. Ohio State undefeated again, number 2 in the country again. A loaded team again. They had games early in the year. They went into, they played Notre Dame early in the year in a highly televised, publicized non-conference game, blew the doors off of them. Literally nobody expected Michigan to even come close in this game. Wolverines came in 7-3. But again, an underachieving team. Michigan got off to a hot start that year, won a key non-conference game at Colorado in what was a big upset at that time, got off to a great start, and then again, couldn't get the quarterback situation settled in Big Ten play. Back and forth we go between Scott Dreisbach and Brian Griese once more. Michigan lost a couple of games they had no business losing. They come into this game with absolutely nothing to lose. And one of the legends of this game is, they have a tradition at Ohio State every year called the senior tackle. A lot of schools do that. But it gets televised in the state of Ohio. And so what happens is, the last practice of the year, the seniors get a celebratory last tackle, and they get congratulated. And Earl Bruce, who I got to be buddies with Earl Bruce late in his life when he moved to Iowa to coach our arena football team, and I used to cover that team a lot. Great guy. Some of the stories he used to tell me about Woody Hayes, I can't say, not even here on the internet. There's a couple I could share with you that when we get into the off season, I may, when we need to fill some time, share some of those stories. I think you'd appreciate them. But Earl Bruce on television, and the Michigan players are watching this in the hotel room, he gives a fiery speech. Michigan sucks. They're not any good. Go earn your gold pants. Some of you know this, that at Ohio State, every time you beat Michigan, you're given a pair of gold pants. That you just you remember that marks the occasion of you beating the Michigan Wolverines. And that speech is said to have fired up the Michigan team every bit as much as it fired up the Ohio State Buckeyes. Ohio State dominated this game in the first half. Michigan really could do nothing offensively. Had one good drive that led to a field goal. The rest of the half, Ohio State marched up and down the field, but a solid Michigan defense stiffened with names like Will Carr and Jared Irons and Charles Woodson and Marcus Ray. They stiffened and forced Ohio State to kick field goals. So at halftime, the game's only 9-3. But it should have been a much larger deficit than that. Scott Dreisbach gets hurt late in the first half. Brian Griese comes off the bench. And on the opening drive of the third quarter, against All-American corner Sean Springs, he hits Ty Streets on an inside slant route. Streets takes it to the house. Michigan takes the lead. And that's when the Buckeyes start puckering like David Duval used to pucker on the 18th hole of the Masters when Tiger Woods was breathing down his neck. That's kind of what the Buckeyes did. They didn't score the entire second half. Michigan eventually grinded out a huge 13-9 upset that by point spread was the biggest upset in the history of this rivalry until the game we have, or except for the game that we have ranked number 1 on our list. And of course, that is 1969. Number 1, Ohio State. Nation's longest winning streak. It was said at the time, the only team that could beat them were the Minnesota Vikings, who are dominating the NFL at the moment. Number 1, Ohio State walks in. Nobody had come within, 3 touchdowns of them all season long. And Michigan pulls what was then labeled the upset of the decade. Michigan upset number 1, Ohio State, 24-12. And there is a chapter in Bo's autobiography that he wrote several years ago with the aid of Mitch Albom, an entire chapter dedicated to this game. And if you are any kind of Michigan fan, heck, if you're just a college football fan, I love college football history. So I've read, Woody Hayes biographies and Barry Switzer biographies, and I love college football history. The chapter Bo writes about this game in his book, if you're a college football fan, put it on your bucket list. Don't leave this earth until you've read the chapter in Bo's autobiography about this game in 1969. One example is Bo brings the team out on the field, and he notices that Ohio State is warming up on his side of the field. Now, for a lot of us that are younger that don't remember these days, Woody was Bo's father figure. Woody was Bo's college coach at Miami of Ohio. Woody was Bo's boss at Ohio State for many years when Bo was the offensive coordinator. Woody was, in many respects, Bo's father figure. And so Bo's built his entire program around beating Ohio State. He had the scout team wore number 50. Every player on the scout team wore number 50. Why? Because the previous year, number 1 Ohio State beat number 4 Michigan 50-14. At the end of the game, they went for 2 to get 50 points. Joe Falls from the Detroit News asks Woody Hayes after the game, hey, why did you go for 2 to run up the score? And Woody gave his now infamous, legendary quote, because I couldn't go for 3. And so Bo has built his entire season around rallying Michigan to pull off this upset against Ohio State. And he comes out, and lo and behold, Woody's warming the Buckeyes up on his side of the field, and Bo's like, hey, I know this is not Woody Hayes' first trip to Michigan Stadium. I used to come here with Woody Hayes. I know he knows he's on the wrong side. This is gamesmanship. And the players are sitting in the tunnel like, hey, Bo, you go out and tell him he's got to move. And Bo's basically like, man, I'm about to pee my pants here. This is the old ball coach. I got to go confront him. And Bo tells the story how he jogged out there to say to Woody, hey, Woody, you know, you're kind of on the wrong side of the field. And Woody looks him up and down just to see if Bo means it, and Woody says, okay. And he moves his team down the other side of the field. And Bo, of course, his heart beating out of his chest. He's a little intimidated to go confront his old field general, his father figure. But when he looked back at his team in the huddle, thought he had just stared down Zarathustra, man. They thought he had gone out there, told Woody, given him the what for, told Woody what's up. And Woody was like, oh, man, I don't want anything of old Bo, and moved his team down the other side of the field. Those kind of anecdotes about this game in his book. If you are a college football fan, don't leave this earth until you read that part of Bo's autobiography. Michigan jumped out to a 24-12 lead. ABC was so confident that Ohio State was going to win this game, they actually didn't send Chris Schenkel and their number 1 crew. They sent the B team because Ohio State was more than a 3-touchdown favorite in this game. But Michigan got off to the quick start 24-12 and then played for the stalemate in the second half and pulled off the game that really marked and cemented the legacy of Bo Schembechler at the University of Michigan. The upset of the decade. Ohio State went down, and Bo leads Michigan to the Rose Bowl in his very first season in Ann Arbor, and the rest, as they say, is history. So now that we've taken a stroll down memory lane, can the Wolverines do it again? You know, I'm a data guy. And when I look at the data, when I look at where we're at offensively, how bad we are, when I look at our quarterback situation, I don't see it. In fact, I'm thinking it might be like 31-10. We played good defense for a while, hold them down for a while, and then they score a couple of touchdowns on us with a worn-out defense because our offense doesn't move the football enough. So I don't see it. But you know what? How many people saw it in 1969? How many people saw it in 1993? How many people saw it in 1995? How many people saw it in 1996? How many people thought that Bo was going to, after losing 4 out of 5 to Ohio State, or losing 3 out of 5, and then there was a tie? How many thought he was going to walk in there in 1976 and shut out Woody Hayes in his own stadium? So I don't see it. But those games we just talked about, we didn't see those coming at the time either. Are you looking to put the ball in your court, your actual court, like this sweet maize and blue Jumpman backyard court? If that's you, Sport Court of Michigan has you covered. From basketball to tennis to batting cages to hoops, if you need anything athletic in your backyard, give them a call. Based out of Michigan, ready to install your court sooner than you might expect. Now, if you're in the Southeast Michigan area or in Ann Arbor, Tim Barnes will personally walk you through the process of having your dreams of a professional court in your backyard. Just visit his website, sportcourtmi.com. Now, if you're outside of Southeast Michigan, you need a hoop for your driveway or your yard, he's got you covered there at monsterhoops.com. That's monsterhoops.com. And they'll ship those right to your door. Now, if you go to monsterhoops.com, you mention Michigan Podcast, you're going to save $100 on a Monster Hoop. That's monsterhoops.com. Mention Michigan Podcast, save 100 smackaroos. Now, if you go to sportcourtmi.com, though, and you get one of those awesome backyard courts, and you mention Michigan Podcast, you can save up to $1,000 on your backyard court, depending on the package you select. So monsterhoops.com, sportcourtmi.com, mention Michigan Podcast, save some money when you do, and tell them Michigan Podcast sent you. Joined now on Michigan Podcast by Michael Spath of Inside the Huddle on WTKA Ann Arbor and the Michigan Insider. Michael, go blue. Welcome to Ohio State Week, and been listening to your show so far this week. And, Monday, I think you spoke for a lot of people. Not even really looking forward to this. Kind of just want to get 2017 done and move on to a more promising 2018. But I noticed earlier today the worm was turning a little bit. You were maybe even, I don't know if you were trying to psych yourself up or the audience or both. Maybe we got a shot here. So what do you think now, a few days before the game? Any confidence at all that Michigan can do what they did in 93, 95, 96, 69, 76, which we just talked about that here in the open? Any confidence we could see history repeat itself, Michael?
Anything is possible, Steve. Anything is possible, and I'm trying to hold on to that. No, you're right. I mean, Monday's show was very much a vent, commiserate, express frustrations, airing of grievances. It was Festivus for most of us on Monday. And today, turn the page a little bit, looking to the game on Saturday. And, there's a little bit of psyching myself up, a little bit of psyching up the crowd. But I think when you look at it, if Brandon Peters can play in the game on Saturday, and from the reports that, if you listen to Pep Hamilton earlier today, and you hear some of the comments from the players and from the coaches, if he can play, and it sounds like there is at least a better shot of that happening than when we saw him take that nasty hit and John O'Corn came in the game last weekend, then I think they have about a 8% chance of winning on Saturday. And that is far better than the 0% I gave them when I looked like John O'Corn was going to be starting quarterback. Look, they're not going to all of a sudden become an offense that we haven't seen all year. If they do, then where's it been? But they need to have Brandon Peters throw the ball, make some big plays like he was starting to do against Wisconsin. They need more from their rushing attack. They need to have the best defensive effort they've had, not only this season, but arguably in the Don Brown era. They need to have their best defensive performance. Special teams got to be rock solid. They need essentially every single thing to go right for them, and then for Ohio State to not play their best football game. If that happens, upset city. We're talking about it like it's 1995, but that was a lot of what-ifs, wasn't it?
It was an awful lot of what-ifs. Before we get back to the game, a big picture question. I just want to get it out of the way now because I think there's a good possibility we could see this narrative if Brandon Peters plays. And, we're in an era where recruits are more aware of what is said in the media than ever before because of social media. And so coaches can use that negative recruiting, potential NCAA violations or off-the-field issues, or is this coach going to leave or go to the NFL or get fired? So if Brandon Peters plays and Michigan still loses, I think you and I both know what the next 8 months of Harbaugh haterade in the media is going to be. He risks a player's safety. Guy was carted off with a head injury, puts him in the game because he's desperate to win. They haven't won any major rivalry games, and that's that. This is not Michigan. That's not what this guy is. We're going to hear that a lot if he plays him and Michigan still loses. And what did Michigan get out of it? They risked a future quarterback to lose to an Ohio State team that was clearly superior anyway. In your opinion, given the nature of recruiting and the nature of media, is that something that this coaching staff should be considering beyond just what gives them the best chance to win this game?
No, absolutely not. 100% not. I don't think that factors in the equation at all. If he's healthy and the doctors clear him to play, then you play him because he does give you the best chance to be successful. I'll tell you what, Steve, if they lose this football game, I don't think the narrative is going to be about Brandon Peters. I think the narrative is going to be about the fact that here we are in year 3, and Jim Harbaugh is 0-3 against Urban Meyer and 1-5 overall against Michigan's 2 primary rivals. And Michigan has finished in 4th place in the division and has never come close to winning the Big Ten title. I think that is a far stronger narrative than any type of negative recruiting about Brandon Peters. That's what they'll go after, Matt. If you're Ohio State and you're saying, hey, man, you could go play for Jim Harbaugh, but the guy's all hype and no substance, or you're Mark D'Antonio and say, hey, yeah, you could go there, but if you want to win games in this rivalry, you'd want to come to play with us. I mean, that is going to be a far bigger issue for them to confront than Brandon Peters going in there and playing as a potentially injured quarterback. But I don't think if he's injured in the least that Jim Harbaugh would risk putting him out there.
I agree with that. I think there's no – I mean, we said an All-American corner who might be a first-round draft pick in 16 months in the NFL. We said him last week. But the game of Feinbaum, half the commentators on ESPN, and everything else. I mean, Harbaugh is John Travolta's character in Get Shorty right now, Mike. You know that. And so they're looking
I never saw Get Shorty, but sure.
They're looking to tack on anything they possibly can at this point. So let's go back to the game now. Was there anything that happened last Saturday against Wisconsin that gives you more optimism about this Saturday than you had already?
More optimism. I guess Quinn Nordine made a field goal.
Yeah, because I couldn't come up with one. That's why I asked you, brother.
God,
couldn't think of one.
I honestly, I'm not trying to be a hater. I'm not trying to be a critic, but what was the positive? The running game that we had seen the last three games, Minnesota, Rutgers, and Maryland, that was supposed to be improved and all the progress, couldn't do jack diddly squat against Wisconsin's front seven. The passing attack had some moments there with Brandon Peters, but didn't put the ball in the end zone multiple times when they had a chance to not put the game out of reach, but to put themselves in a great position to win. The defense, as soon as the offense made it 10-7, the defense let them come right down the field and score for the go-ahead touchdown, and then the very next drive gave up the, not the game-winning, but the game-cementing touchdown. Special teams gave up a punt return. Donovan Peoples-Jones didn't really do anything. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything coming out of that game on Saturday where I'm going, wow, man, the future is super bright, and they're going to beat Ohio State because of what I saw on Saturday. Again, I'm not trying to be a downer, but I'm at a loss to come up with one thing.
Final question with Michael Spath from WTKA Ann Arbor, who's our guest here on Michigan Podcast. I listened to the post-game podcast with former All-Big Ten lineman Doug Skeen over at the Wolverine, your former employer. And he said something that really made my blood boil because it confirmed what I was thinking as 44-year-old guy in my man cave watching in my basement. But I never played at this level, so I'm really hesitant to question some of the toughness of guys that are elite-level athletes. But he mentioned watching another one of our quarterbacks go down in Brandon Peters, and what he saw when he watched the film, maybe a little extra shove the Wisconsin guy gave him, and watching Michigan offensive linemen just kind of stand around and watch that happen, and that it was actually Wisconsin's defensive players that were motioning to Michigan's team physicians to get over here, and that really, really frosted him. Now, you watch the film every week with another former Michigan great who is an All-American, in Benny Jopru's case. Has he made something of that? Because it really bothered me when I watched it at home. But again, I'm a 44-year-old guy in my man cave. I don't, know what these guys go through or what's really going on out there. But when I hear Doug Skeen say, that ain't how we roll at Michigan and that ain't right, did Benny Jopru say anything about that at all to you, Michael?
He didn't say anything about that specific play and that they didn't help him up. He was more ticked off about the fact that the Michigan offensive line has not been able to learn from their mistakes and are still having problems with the stunting up front that has gotten two quarterbacks knocked out of games this year and potentially has ended two seasons of quarterbacks and could get a third quarterback if John O'Corn's the guy on Saturday, could get a third quarterback knocked out of the game. And he thinks it's utterly, when he sees these guys look exasperated and be kind of walking up to each other and be like, I thought you had it or you had it. And he looks at them kind of almost quasi-pointing fingers. That's what really pisses him off, is this idea that there's this lack of accountability. And instead of guys running over to Peters, like you said, and picking him up and saying my bad, I'm so sorry, I screwed up, my bad, that they're just kind of like, ho hum, oh boy. I mean, this offensive line, I keep on coming back to all that progress being made. And I've had this debate on Twitter, and I know that you follow me, and we kind of, you've seen this. But to me, someone saying that Michigan has made progress on the offensive line this year and made progress in the running game because of what they did against Minnesota, Rutgers, and Maryland, and then ignoring the fact that they didn't do anything against Wisconsin, that's not progress to me. Progress is when the other team knows that you're going to run the football. The other team is good at stopping the run. You need to have a successful running game to help yourself win, and you can run the football. If you can't run the football against the 4 toughest teams on your schedule, how is that progress? That's what really gets my goat up, is that this idea that these guys are satisfied, or these guys thought that they had arrived, and they're nowhere close to have arrived as an offensive line. But I can understand where Skeen's coming from. I can understand where you're coming from, too, that really ticked you off.
Michael Spath from the Michigan Insider and WTKA Ann Arbor. Always good to talk to you, brother. Go Blue. Have a good Thanksgiving, okay?
Yeah, you guys too. And hopefully, listen, I look forward to talking next week. And hopefully we're talking about something spectacular. Hopefully we're talking about an upset. Hopefully we're talking about one of those great games that we are so grateful. We overlooked this Michigan team, and we're so grateful and so happy. And we're finishing the season on a high note. I don't see it happening, but I'd love to be wrong. I'm
with you on that. Thank you, Michael. God bless. Take care. Happy Thanksgiving. More Michigan podcast in a moment. This is a look at our page on Patreon, patreon.com/Michigan podcast. Thanks to those of you that are supporting our efforts here to make it possible for us to do what we do here. A lot of you ask me, hey, how can we get you guys to do more content? Well, to do more means it requires us taking time away from stuff that actually pays our bills. And so if that's what you want to see, if you want to see us doing more stuff here on Michigan Podcast, supporting us on Patreon is a great way to do it. We give you access to our instant reaction post-game podcast, as well as my picks against the spread every week during the college football season. And yes, I will be doing some Patreon podcast after Michigan basketball games this winter, and we'll come up with new stuff as well in order to say thank you to our exclusive supporters at Patreon. So thanks to all of you who are supporting what we are doing here on Michigan Podcast. Well, we just mentioned with Michael Spath a few minutes ago that he watches the film every week with former Michigan All-American tight end Benny Jopru, and we feature that film study right here on Michigan Podcast. It's Michigan Football 101. Here's a breakdown of the film against last week's loss to the Badgers.
We're back for our football film review with Benny Jopru. I'm Michael Spath, and 10:06 in the first quarter, and Cron Higdon shows you his toughness and power. Gets about an 8-yard gain here. And Benny, as you're telling me, it's kind of a very tough defensive line to prepare for Michigan's offensive line.
So Wisconsin came in this game, they weren't going to let us run the power play, so they're going to play a 0 technique or a 1 technique directly over the center, and then play 2-3 techniques, each of the defensive tackles outside shade on the guard. And it really causes problems for the double teams to get up to the second level or have double teams at all. And right here, this is a counter, almost more of an ISO play. This isn't a power play. There isn't a puller on this play. And we run right through the front side A-gap, and Higdon does a great job squeezing through there and powering through 6-7 tacklers and getting almost 9 yards in the play. And we're thinking, okay, we're moving the ball, we can out-tough these guys. And it was an exciting first play, good tough run by Higdon, getting those extra yards.
As far off as Michigan was in this game, as much as its running game didn't go very far, it wasn't that far off, Benny. And here's a perfect example of how they do almost everything right, except it looks like Cesar Ruiz trips a little bit. Yeah,
so Michigan runs power again for the first time in a while in this game. With 4 minutes into the second quarter, we hadn't seen Michigan run too much power yet, and they're going to run the power here. Mason Cole does a good job. We catch Wisconsin a little bit of a slant here. Mason Cole does a good job watching his guy down. Sean McEwen does a good job watching his guy down. Pogge does a good job on the safety or defensive back. And then Ruiz coming around, gets surprised by the blitzing linebacker and kind of stumbles and isn't able to make the block. And if you see, there's quite a nice hole there to the outside of Ruiz.
Yeah, this could have been a touchdown, or at the very least a 20 to 25-yard play before that safety in the deep back gets out there to cover the guy. So,
yeah, really nice play by the Wisconsin guy too, getting through there and shooting his gun and making the tackle.
Brandon Peters takes a shot here, but stays in there with something we talked about earlier in the year. We want to see quarterbacks stay in there and deliver a big pass completion to Zach Gentry.
Yeah, Gentry here on a little bit of a wheel route. Almost, he comes in motion, runs down the sideline, and just runs a vertical route on on the sideline over there, and Peters stands in tough, takes a huge shot, and makes a great throw to Gentry, and Gentry wide open catches the ball and gets down to the 5-yard line, and here we are thinking that we got a really good chance here to go ahead here in this game.
Yeah, and a shot that probably on second look was likely either a targeting or one of those plays where they say they drive the guy into the ground you're not supposed to.
Yeah, I also thought that there was he really kind of stuck his helmet under his chin, looked like to me as well. So questionable hit on the Wisconsin guys, but Peters showing he's a tough guy.
It would not be a Michigan football film review without one spectacular play from Maurice Hurst, and here he combines with Aubrey Solomon for a tackle for loss.
Yeah, Wisconsin just had a couple big plays against us back to back, and we're kind of hurting here after the fumble on the goal line. And here comes Maurice Hurst, great swim move on the offensive guard, and just backdoors the whole play. And with his speed, is able to get upfield and corral the running back, and Aubrey Solomon's there to help him out. And then even
Rashawn
Gary is there also. So everyone's there, and it's with a big play to kind of stall this drive out a little bit after some consecutive big plays.
Well, we already had one Maurice Hurst play, and here's a second one of 14:22 to go in the third quarter, and he blows this play up on this jet sweep before it can even get going.
Yeah, so you see here, Michigan shows this. What they're doing with their safeties now as far as the motion to prevent the jet sweep. They're going to roll down the safety down to the other side, and the corner is going to move back to safety. But here they do some counter motion, and the receiver motion comes back, takes the handoff, and Maurice Hurst just completely blows this play up like he's been doing all year long. And Michigan's obviously shown some adjustments to deal with the jet sweep or the reverse at halftime. Something we'll have to take a look at again later in the game.
What I like not only is Maurice Hurst here, and he blows up, but Rashawn Gary again. You said, and the announcer said this earlier, but a lot of balls, a lot of hats to the ball here.
Yeah, and you see Mo Hurst just, coming off the line like an absolute bullet, and no one's even touching him, and he maintains his balance and is able to make a play.
Imitation is the sincerest form of flattering. We've been waiting for Michigan to maybe do a wheel route after watching so many other teams do a wheel route against them. Here, about 12:25 to go in the third quarter, Michigan gets Khalid Hill out in open space for a big completion.
Yeah, so similar concepts to Gentry's catch earlier down the sideline on a somewhat of a wheel route as well. This is Khalid Hill out of the backfield, heavy play action, and somehow this giant human squeezes through one of the smallest holes I've ever seen, gets sideways and gets up the field, and Wisconsin loses him in the mess, and he's wide open for a completion down the sideline. Good touch pass by Peters. Good way to start this drive.
8:40 to go in the third quarter, and Devin Bush, who's had his hands on a couple of balls this year and has just come up a little bit empty, this time gets his hands on it after a little bit of bobble, picks off the pass, Benny.
So Michigan here sitting back, and what looks to be a cover 2 zone here. A little play action here, and by playing the zone, Devin Bush is able to keep his eyes in the backfield, sees that's play action, and uses his speed to get back in the hole and gets underneath pretty poorly thrown ball by Hornibrook here. But great play by Devin Bush. And once again, it looks like Michigan's playing zone, and a lot of the interceptions we haven't seen lately have been out of a zone defense, giving the defense the opportunity to be looking back, watching the quarterback, rather than playing their guys man-to-man.
8:30 in the third quarter, right after the interception, and Michigan runs a little bit of a misdirection to Donovan Peoples-Jones here with great lead blocks from McCune, Mason Cole, and Cesar Ruiz.
Yeah, sudden change here. Michigan's like to throw the deep ball or take shots when they cross the 40, and we're across the 40 here after the interception, so we're going to run a little reverse here off the counter. So we're going to pull the backside guard like it is our counter, and hand off the ball to Donovan Peoples-Jones. Mason Cole does a good job getting out front, a little skip pull, gets out front, creates a lane. Ruiz is out there downfield, and pretty well block play, and Michigan showing some creativity off of the counter.
3:40 to go in the third quarter, and what really killed Michigan, Benny, and this is a great throw and catch. Great throw by Alex Hornibrook, but 3 third and longs on this drive that the Badgers were able to convert, and here 3rd and 16 that turns into a touchdown.
So Michigan is, they converted on us against a man-to-man defense earlier, and this one appears to be more of a zone defense here. and the safety gets in the middle of the field, and he tries to split the two defenders down the middle of the field, and offer some help, and Hornibrook just reads him and makes a great throw and just rips it in there right behind the safety's back and in front of the corner, and just a great throw. And if Metellus goes to the other receiver, then he probably throws it over Devin Bush's head to that receiver in the end zone. Good route combination by Wisconsin, and a good call.
Start of the fourth quarter, Benny here, and Michigan goes back to the power running game. It actually pulls Ben Bredesen and Mason Cole from the left side to come on the right side.
Yeah, so obviously Michigan's been having trouble with the extra linebacker, or seems to be an extra linebacker from Wisconsin, getting in the power play, so they're going to pull an extra guy for him, apparently. I've never actually ever seen this before where the tackle's pulling on a power play, but he gets there. He's fast enough and athletic enough to get there. Once again, the tight end's doing a fantastic job on their blocks. Really good job here by Gentry and Sean McCune both, and we get a gain of 10 yards for one of John O'Corn's first drives.
This week's Twitter poll results, we asked you, do you agree with some of those in the sports media claiming Jim Harbaugh is a, quote, bust or, quote, overrated? Some of the quotes I've seen from some of the know-it-alls in college football media. 25% of you say yes. 14% of you chose ask me after next week. It's a good answer. 61% of you said no. You know what I love about college football media, by the way? It's why people hate the media in general. And I work in the media, and this is why you hate us. So all off season, a lot of the same college football media saying Harbaugh is overrated, he's not that good right now, were the same people that told us all offseason, you guys lost too much, you're not going to be that good, it's a rebuilding year, you're probably going 8-4, 9-3. Remember that? We had this argument for like 8 months. And now that it turns out, yeah, you're right, we were too young, too many injuries at quarterback, we're going to end up 8-4, 9-3. Those exact same people who told us for 8 months, you're too young, you're going to go 8-4, 9-3, are now saying, how dare Harbaugh go 8-4, 9-3 like we predicted for 8 months he was going to do, he's an overrated hack. Speaking of hacks, that's why so many of you hate my industry, is those sorts of double standards, that sort of hacktastic fake news and analysis. And I don't blame you for it at all. I work in this industry and I hate it every bit as much as you do. This week's question of the week. Tom Skoog asks, was Dylan McCaffrey redshirted this year? My niece/nephew went to his high school in Highlands Ranch, that's in Denver, Colorado, and he's supposed to be something else. And yes, he is supposed to be something else, and he's got a pretty high recommendation, by the way, earlier this year from our defensive coordinator, Don Brown, who says, hey, he's given us fits on the scout team. Not often a defensive coordinator singles out a redshirted quarterback in an off-week press conference. So when Don Brown does, pay attention. He is redshirting. He is supposed to be something else. He should definitely be in the mix for the quarterback competition next year. And I think there's a decent chance his younger brother, Luke, could end up as a signee in Michigan's 2019 class as well. All right, let's look at some bowl projections. Yes, it's that time of year now. Here's how right now I'm projecting based on how I think the season will end. This is how I'm projecting the college football playoff, the New Year's Six bowl games, and the Big Ten games. And yes, I think Auburn's going to beat Alabama on Saturday and then lose to Georgia. And I think 2 SEC teams will therefore make it into the playoff. Clemson and Alabama will meet again, this time in my semifinal. Oklahoma against Georgia as the SEC champ. In the other semifinal, Miami and Notre Dame, a rematch in the Orange Bowl. Peach Bowl, Wisconsin against Central Florida. Fiesta Bowl, USC and Ohio State essentially move the Rose Bowl that's hosting the playoff. They move it to Phoenix for the Fiesta Bowl this year. Auburn against Penn State in the Cotton Bowl, and with those being the New Year's Six matchups, this is how I think things will shake out for the Big Ten. Sparty against Mississippi State in the Citrus Bowl, the Outback Bowl, LSU against Michigan. Wouldn't that be a lot of fun? I don't think we've even played them before. Northwestern and Stanford in the Holiday Bowl. First one to a 4.0 wins. Kentucky versus Indiana. That's a heck of a basketball matchup. In the Tax Slayer Bowl, yes, I think the Hoosiers will beat Purdue on Saturday. Pinstripe Bowl, Louisville against Iowa. Out there at Yankee Stadium, I'm sure the Iowa defense would really love to chase Lamar Jackson around for a few hours or not. If I had a vote this week, though, in the College Football Playoff Committee, these would be my top 4 teams. Alabama, number 1. Oklahoma, number 2. Miami, number 3. Clemson, number 4. And can I just say one quick thing about Oklahoma? I don't mind all the criticism and hand-wringing over Baker Mayfield's antics and the crotch grab. I don't. I get it. It's unseemly. It's conduct unbecoming. I'm fine with it. However, can you tell me in what universe you're more offended that the dude grabbed his crotch than a Kansas player took a cheap shot at him to his dome in this era of hypersensitivity to head injuries and CTE and concussions, and took a shot at him that, who knows, could have ended his career for nothing on a 1-10 football team? You know, we can do 2 things at once. It's called being an adult. Not everything has to be all or nothing. You know, so you can be disappointed, dismayed, disagree with Baker Mayfield's behavior and criticize it. But if all your criticism is for the guy that got his dome rung on a cheap shot that wasn't somehow called for targeting, and not the guys that went after him and targeted him, I'm sorry, but I think your scales of justice are slightly skewed, but that's just my opinion. I could be wrong. Speaking of Baker Mayfield, if I had to vote in the Heisman Trophy ceremony this week, my ballot, you'd submit 3 on a Heisman ballot. My top 3 would be Baker Mayfield. There's Lamar Jackson, who in some respects has even better numbers than he had last year, and Kerryon Johnson at Auburn, who's got a real chance these next couple of weeks. If he can beat Alabama and win an SEC championship and lead his team in those 2 games, he's got a real chance to make Baker Mayfield sweat out that Heisman Trophy vote here in the second week of December. That's going to do it for this week's Michigan podcast. Thanks so much for watching us. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. Enjoy the game. I hope. Go Blue.